I've spent 20 years looking at crime scenes, and usually they scream at you. There's broken glass, blood spatter, or the chaotic mess left behind after a struggle. But when I walked into room 412 of the Cedarcrest Wellness Center, the silence was what hit me first. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy. It felt like the air in the room was holding its breath. On the bed lay Arthur Vance. He was 72 years old, a retired clockmaker who had checked in for a standard hip recovery. He should have been going home in 2 days. Instead, he was staring at the ceiling with eyes that saw nothing. I looked at his bedside table, a half-empty glass of water, a pair of reading glasses, and there, dangling just inches from his right hand, was the red call button. In a hospital, that button is your lifeline. It's the one thing that connects a person in pain to the help they need. We're taught from childhood that if you're scared or hurting in a hospital bed, you press that button and an angel in scrubs appears. But Arthur Vance hadn't pressed it. At first, the hospital staff called it a tragic natural event. They said his heart simply gave out in the middle of the night. It happens, right? Especially in a place full of sick people. But as I stood there, I noticed something that the morning shift nurses had missed. Arthur's hand wasn't just resting near the button. His index finger was hooked, frozen in an extreme effort. He hadn't been resting. He had been reaching. He had been fighting to reach that plastic trigger with everything he had left. I turned to the head nurse, a woman named Deborah who had worked there for 30 years. She wouldn't look me in the eye. "Did the alarm go off at the nurse's station?" I asked. "No," she whispered, her voice shaking. "The logs show room 412 was silent all night. No calls, no alerts. He just passed away in his sleep." I didn't believe her. I've seen enough bodies to know the difference between someone who went quietly and someone who died in terror. I walked over to the wall where the call button was plugged into the socket. I expected to see it disconnected, maybe a simple technical error. But it was plugged in. The green light on the wall was glowing, signaling that the system was active. That was the moment the hair on the back of my neck stood up. If the system was working, and Arthur was clearly trying to press it, why didn't the computer record a single hit? I decided right then to look at the other rooms, and that's when I realized Arthur Vance wasn't the first person to die in that wing while reaching for a button that supposedly never rang. To find the truth, I had to go into the basement. That's where the hospital's brain lived, a humming server room filled with the digital footprints of every single interaction between a patient and the staff. In modern medicine, everything is tracked. When a nurse scans a pill, it's logged. When a door opens, it's logged. And most importantly, when a patient presses that red button, a time-stamped entry is created that cannot be erased. Or at least that's what the brochure says. I sat down with Miller, the hospital's IT director. He was a guy who preferred monitors to people, but even he looked rattled. "I ran the report you asked for," Miller said, his voice flat. He turned the screen toward me. "This is the call log history for the West Wing last night." I leaned in. The screen was a wall of clinical text. 12:04 a.m., room 408 requested water. 12:15 a.m., room 415 requested pain medication. 1:30 a.m., room 410 requested assistance for a restroom trip. And then there was room 412, Arthur Vance's room. Between 2 a.m. and 3:30 a.m., the window the coroner estimated for Arthur's death, the log for room 412 was a flat line, not a single entry. It looked exactly like what the nurses had told me, a man who never asked for help. "Wait," I said, pointing at the bottom of the column. "What are those gaps?" I noticed that the timestamps didn't flow perfectly. There was a jump from 2:14:59 to 2:15:04. A 5-second hole, then another one at 2:20. "It looks like a system lag," Miller muttered, rubbing his eyes. "The network has been glitchy lately. We've been filing tickets with the provider for months." 5 seconds isn't a lag, Miller. That's a heartbeat," I replied. "Can you pull the raw data? Not this summarized report, but the actual command lines from the server. Miller sighed, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He went deeper into the code, bypassing the user-friendly interface. After a few minutes, he froze. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he was going to faint. "What is it?" I asked. "The logs weren't just empty, they were overwritten," whispered Miller. "Look at the metadata column." I looked. Underneath the empty status for room 412, there was a ghost command, a line of code that had been executed at 2:16 a.m. It didn't say call received. It said signal divert success. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a technical glitch. A divert command meant that someone had manually told the computer to take any signal coming from Arthur's room and send it nowhere. It didn't ring at the nurse's station. It didn't light up the hallway. Arthur could have hammered that button 1,000 times, and to the rest of the world, he was silent. "Who has the authority to run a divert command from a terminal?" I asked. Miller looked at me, his eyes wide behind his glasses. "Only 3 people on the night shift have the override codes, and one of them was standing right outside Arthur's door when he died." The interrogation room at the precinct is designed to be uncomfortable. The air is always a little too cold, and the fluorescent lights have a high-pitched hum that grates on your nerves after 20 minutes. Sitting across from me was Marcus Thorne. He was a senior floor nurse, the kind of guy patients usually loved, soft-spoken, efficient, and always ready with a calm smile. But today, the smile was gone. He sat with his hands folded perfectly on the table, his posture so straight it looked painful. "Marcus," I started, leaning back to look like I was just having a casual chat. "The hospital logs are a mess. We found something called a signal divert. Do you know what that is?" "I'm a nurse, not an IT specialist. I care for people, I don't manage servers." "That's funny," I said, sliding a printout of the server logs across the table. "This divert command was entered using your personal authorization code at exactly 2:14 a.m., right when Arthur's heart rate started to climb. Why would you want to mute a dying man?" For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not fear. It was more like annoyance, like I was a child who didn't understand a complex math problem. "Arthur Vance was a frequent flyer," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. "Do you know what that means in our world? It means he pressed that button every 10 minutes, for a pillow fluff, for the TV volume, for a glass of water that was already right there. He was exhausting the staff. He was taking time away from patients who actually needed us." "So you decided to play God? You decided he didn't get to have a voice anymore?" Marcus leaned forward, the shadows under his eyes making him look skeletal. "I didn't kill him. His heart killed him. I just gave the rest of the ward a few hours of peace. I intended to turn the signal back on during my 4 a.m. rounds. How was I supposed to know he'd choose those 2 hours to have a cardiac event?" "He didn't choose it. He was terrified. He was reaching for you, and you turned him into a ghost." I watched his hands. They were perfectly still. That's what scared me the most, the lack of a tremor. "You think I'm the monster?" he whispered. "Check the logs 6 months ago, before I even started working the West Wing. You'll find signal diverts all over this hospital. It's the industry's dirty little secret. We're understaffed, underpaid, and we're drowning. Sometimes we just need the screaming to stop." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. If Marcus is telling the truth, Arthur Vance wasn't a one-off victim of a cruel nurse. He was a casualty of a system that had learned how to silence its most vulnerable people. "I'm going to check those logs, Marcus," I said, standing up. "And if I find what I think I'm going to find, you're not the only one going to prison." Marcus's words haunted me. If signal diverts were a systemic fix for understaffing, then the trail didn't end with a rogue nurse. It led straight to the mahogany desks on the top floor. I headed back to Cedarcrest Wellness Center, but the atmosphere had shifted. The air was no longer just heavy, it was hostile. As I stepped through the glass double doors, I saw 2 men in dark suits wheeling heavy-duty shredding bins out of the administrative suite.
I didn't have a warrant for the paper files yet, but I had something better, a contact inside. Miller, the hospital's IT director, sent me a frantic text that purging the cloud backups. If you aren't here in 10 minutes, Arthur Vance's records are gone forever. I bypassed the elevators and took the stairs 3 at a time. When I burst into the server room, the lights were flickering. Miller was hunched over his terminal, his face drenched in sweat. "I can't stop it from this terminal,"